the best of Money Matters.
Market View on Money FM 89.3.
That's right, you're listening to Money FM 89.3. Time now for Market View with me, Chua Tian Tian, where we take a look at how the Singapore stock market closed for the day, the biggest movers, sectors, and of course the companies to watch. But as always, a quick recap of how we started. Well, Singapore shares began the day in the green following mixed performance in the US and Europe on Friday. In early trade, the Straits Times Index was up 0.3% at 3,889 points after some 35.6 million securities changed hands in the broader market. Now let's take you through the closing numbers. The STI closed up 0.71% at 3,904 points. In terms of value turnover, we are looking at 1.06 billion Sing dollars. Gainers outnumbered losers, 305 versus 244. Top advances for today, we've got here GMHUSD, UOB and ASUS, and top decliners, we've got here Shenzhen, Yangzijiang Shipbuilding Sing dollars and sets. Now, in terms of companies to watch for the day, we have for you ComfortDelGro, because the land transport operator said it has a zero-tolerance policy towards any kind of fraud and wrongdoing, and that is in response to media publications alleging its indirect, wholly-owned subsidiaries of scams and fraudulent taxi transactions. Now, elsewhere, from Singapore's non-oil domestic exports charting a surprise decline in January to how new downloads of DeepSeek were suspended in South Korea, we've got more local and corporate headlines in focus for the day. And joining me on a Monday is David Kuo, co-founder of The Smart Investor. How are you, Mr. Kuo?
I am very good, Tian Tian. How are you?
Good, good. And let's start with the Singapore stock market as usual, Mr. Kuo. How did the STI fare today? Any surprises when it comes down to the companies to watch, say, SIA Engineering? I mean, net profit for the third quarter ended December increased 42% on the year to 38.2 million Sing dollars. Any thoughts on that?
Okay, so taking the market as a whole, I'm a little surprised that the market did as well as it has today, simply because America's on holiday, and generally when America is on holiday, everybody just sits on their hands. But it is quite reassuring to see that the Singapore market was up today, and I think that was generally powered by the banks. And following on from the good DBS results, I think people are looking forward to some good performances from the remaining two Singapore banks that are yet to report. But your question about SIA Engineering, I think that is only to be expected. If you have a look around, most of the companies that are related to the travel industry seem to be doing quite well. And I think that SIA is just an example of that. More planes in the sky means that there is going to be more maintenance that is required for the planes, and that is good for SIA. So I think for investors who like a bit of market timing, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to go and have a look at some of those counters that are involved in the travel industry. So things like airlines, maybe some of the hotels, hospitality, those kind of things should start to do pretty well, Jen.
I see. And Mr. Kuo, let's zoom in on some of the other counters to watch. We've got here ComfortDelGro, because the land transport operator said today that it has a zero-tolerance policy towards any kind of fraud and wrongdoing. And that's, of course, in response to media publications alleging that its indirect, wholly-owned subsidiaries of scams and fraudulent taxi transactions. How would you read into the development, and how significant is this to investors if we look at the counter's share price movements today?
I think in general, most Singapore companies do have a kind of zero tolerance with regards to bad actors. But unfortunately, I think when you have a large organization like ComfortDelGro that has businesses not only in Singapore but also in Australia, in China, in the UK, there are going to be bad actors. I think what we need to do now is to let ComfortDelGro, the Australian operation side, investigate, find out what exactly is going on, and then just wait for the report. I mean, the shares are down a little today, down about sort of 3 cents, 2 cents, I mean, which is hardly anything. But even still, I mean, if there was something bad that went on over in Australia, and I'm not saying there is anything bad that went on in Australia, it will be weeded out, and then we can just expect the management and ComfortDelGro to come down heavily on those people who are not behaving properly. I mean, if you have cab drivers in Australia that are being a bit sharp as far as pricing is concerned, these things unfortunately do happen. But it is really up to the company then to lay down the law and say that these kind of things must not happen. And if you are going to be driving for one of our subsidiaries, then you have to behave yourself. Otherwise, you will be out. So I'm not too concerned about that, again.
I see. And Mr. Kuo, let's stay in Singapore as we turn our sights to the release of January's NODX or non-oil domestic export numbers out today. Now, if we look at Singapore NODX, it surprised in January because it went down by 2.1% on the year, with electronics up but non-electronics down. What stood out to you this time around? And as always, whenever we look at NODX, what does it say about the outlook of export-oriented firms listed in Singapore, and particularly so against the backdrop of Trump 2.0?
So first of all, Tian Tian, I don't think we should read too much into 1 month's data. And let's not also forget that it was coming up to Chinese New Year, and just like me, Tian Tian went on holiday. And a lot of people do go on holiday around that time of year. So it is not that surprising that exports were down, simply because I think factories were down also. And we have to remember that the previous month, maybe there was a bit of front loading, and those figures were pretty good. So I think what we need to do, if we're going to have a look at NODX figures, non-oil domestic exports, is to have a look at the 2-month figures and then just average them out and just see how they are doing. But with regards to your second question, in other words, the possible impact of tariffs, I think that is something we need to watch very, very carefully, because even though Singapore may not be directly affected by the tariffs, there is something else, which is that some of the other countries may be affected by the tariffs. And if Singapore is a destination where people are doing part of their manufacturing and then shipping out to those other countries, then what we may find, for instance, circuit boards. If those circuit boards are destined for places like maybe Taiwan, maybe South Korea, maybe Thailand, Malaysia, if those circuit boards are going there and there are tariffs imposed on those countries, then it may indirectly affect Singapore. So we need to be very watchful about what is going on. Singapore itself, I don't think is going to be affected, but those other countries might be, Tian.
I see. Now, if you're just tuning in, we're now in conversation with David Kuo, co-founder of The Smart Investor. Well, across the region, Mr. Kuo, all eyes are on South Korea, given how South Korea's data protection authority said today that new downloads of Chinese AI app DeepSeek had been suspended in the country. Now, that's after, of course, DeepSeek acknowledged that it had failed to take into account some of the agency's rules on personal data protection. And in a media briefing, the authority said the service of the app will be resumed once improvements are made in accordance with South Korea's privacy law. How would you read into the latest move, given how Italy also earlier ordered DeepSeek to block its chatbot in the country?
Yeah, Tian. I mean, this is something that worries me a little, because we are finding that AI, artificial intelligence, is being used. And let's not just restrict this to DeepSeek. I think we need to have a look at AI in general. And that is that you and I are having a conversation now. And who knows? I mean, maybe this is going to be uploaded to the cloud. And consequently, some of the things that I say may be misinterpreted by AI. And then it is transcribed and said, David said this, David said that. Even though I may not have directly said it, it could have been implied. And I think we need to be very, very careful. And I think in this particular case, Korea is playing it safe. And what they're saying is that they want certain assurances, and I think Italy is doing the same. We can't allow the Wild West to actually run artificial intelligence, because if we were to do that, then I think we're going to get ourselves into a lot of trouble later on. I mean, I was thinking about it the other day, where some companies are holding meetings and they're using AI to actually record the meeting itself, and then it saves the note taker or maybe the secretary some work, because what they can do is to say, well, ChatGPT will just transcribe this entire meeting, and then ChatGPT will make certain assumptions about the things that are being said, and these things could be uploaded onto the cloud. And I think we need to be very careful, particularly if, I mean, in this particular case, you and I are having a public conversation. But in other cases, it could be a private conversation, and we need to be very aware of what is happening to this data, what is it being used for, how are these large language models being trained, and are they being trained properly? So it is good to be cautious, I think, at this stage.
And a quick one over here, Mr. Kuo, from DeepSeek, we must look at Tencent because Tencent shares closed up nearly 4% today in Hong Kong after the firm said its Weixin messaging app has launched beta testing and with DeepSeek. So what's the outlook for Tencent then? Do you foresee Tencent to in any way be sort of, lack of better words, be implicated by data privacy concerns surrounding DeepSeek?
I think so, yeah. And I think, I refer to the answer that I gave earlier on. I think we need to be very, very wary about how artificial intelligence is going to be used. But in the case of Tencent, this is only one part of their business. And I think what has really happened is that investors are looking at Tencent. They're probably assuming that Tencent shares were cheap. And so this has provided a catalyst for the Tencent shares to move significantly higher. But Tencent's real business is in gaming. And I think we need to watch the gaming business, the gaming side of their business, and see whether or not that is going to be driving the earnings for the company. I'm not entirely sure that something like artificial intelligence is really going to be an earnings driver for many of these companies, but it may be something that will excite people and think that maybe there might be some possibility in the future. But in the case of Tencent, it's all about gaming, Tencent.
Okay. And we must talk about this as well, Mr. Kuo, and that is how Chinese President Xi Jinping met Alibaba's co-founder Jack Ma and other Chinese tech executives today. And the hope on trading floors was that there could be further support for the private sector, which has been, of course, hit by a series of crackdowns in the past few years. Any thoughts on that? And how far have equities in mainland China and Hong Kong priced in that optimism since reports emerged, I believe, on Friday?
I think it's a bit of a beauty pageant. It's almost like China saying that, Donald Trump got some tech heads over there and they had a photo shoot and it said that the tech industry in America is going to be somehow protected by Donald Trump's administration. And I think China was doing similar things and trying to show the world that, yes, it is embracing the new technology. But let's not also forget that things in China can change at the drop of a hat. So whilst they are having this love-in at the moment over in China, it could change tomorrow. And just as Jack Ma and Tony Ma were, to some extent, ostracized by the Chinese administration, the same thing could happen again. So let's just wait and see what happens. But I think China is putting a lot of hopes on artificial intelligence, and they're saying that they can give America a run for its money, which is really a good thing, Tian, because it means that we as consumers are going to actually benefit. We're already benefiting from DeepSeek because it has shown that, you don't need billions of dollars invested in this industry to benefit consumers. You can do it for a lot less. So I think I love competition and I love what is going on in that industry right now.
I see. And further away, Mr. Kuo, markets and the U.S. are closed today for Washington's birthday or President's Day 2025. But we've got a lot to look forward to where earnings are concerned, including from Walmart, Grab, Reliance Steel and Aluminium. Talk about Trump tariff plans. How would you really prioritize what to watch this week?
The first two on your list, Tian. So Walmart number one and then Grab number two. The reason why I want to look at Walmart is simply because I want to know how American consumers are behaving at the moment. We're beginning to see things like consumers losing a little bit of confidence in America, which is not great news. And then number two, consumers are under pressure because of rising prices. So I want to see what Walmart has to say. Generally, Walmart is not just the numbers, it's what they say about what consumers are buying. And so if Walmart can give us some insight into what consumers are doing, how consumers are behaving, then I think it will give us a pretty good idea about what is happening in the American economy. More than any official data that comes out from the official statistics, Walmart can tell us more about what is happening on the ground in America. And secondly, Grab. I want to know those numbers. And is there any truth in the fact that they are talking with another ride-hailing operator over here? Because what seems to be happening is that costs are a big problem for these two companies. They're fighting each other tooth and nail in order to get riders. And if we have a look at those numbers, it'll give us a better insight as to whether or not there could be a merger between these two companies.
I see. Lots to watch indeed. Thanks so much for the insights, Mr. Kuo. That was David Kuo, co-founder of The Smart Investor. Thank you so much for joining us on Money FM 89.3.
Thank you.
Before acting on the information on Money FM, please consider if it's suitable for your own investment objectives, financial situation, and risk tolerance.